My name is Clara Jensen, and I'm a 34-year-old, and I moved here with my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, 2 years ago, hoping to find a safe and friendly community. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. The streets were lined with trees, children played on the sidewalks, and neighbors waved as they passed. But as the months went by, I began to sense something was off, especially about the house next door. The Johnsons had lived there for years, but after Mr. Johnson passed away, his widow moved to a nursing home, leaving the house to their son, an elderly man named Mr. Frank Johnson. He was rarely seen outside, and when he was, it was always for a quick trip to the mailbox or his car. I often noticed him staring at our house when he thought no one was watching. His eyes were dark and sunken, and his skin had a pallid, almost ghostly hue. There was a stillness about him that made me uneasy. It all started with the noises. At first, I dismissed them as the usual sounds of an old house settling. But as the weeks turned into months, the sounds grew louder and more concerning. I heard banging, dragging sounds, and even muffled voices that seemed to seep through the walls and into my home. Each time I heard those sounds, my heart raced. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. One evening, while Lily was busy watching her cartoons, I decided to investigate. I stepped into my backyard, making my way toward the Johnsons' property. I was careful to stay out of sight, my heart pounding in my chest. The curtains in Mr. Johnson's living room were drawn, but one window was slightly ajar. I took a deep breath and leaned in, peeking through the gap. What I saw made my stomach churn. The room was filled with photographs, hundreds of them, tacked haphazardly onto the walls. They were all pictures of me and Lily, taken from various angles, at different times. There were candid shots of us playing in the park, grocery shopping, and even one of us in our yard, caught off guard while I was watering the flowers. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. These weren't just random pictures, they were intimate moments of our lives. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Had he been watching us? I rushed inside and dialed the police, my hands shaking. When they arrived, I tried to explain the situation, but they found nothing suspicious. "He's just an old man, Mom," the officer said, offering a reassuring smile. "We can't act on just a feeling." I felt helpless, as if my fear was brushed aside like an annoying fly. The days passed, and my anxiety only grew. I started watching Mr. Johnson more closely, trying to catch a glimpse of what he was doing inside. One night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw him through the window. He was dragging a large, heavy bag across his living room floor, his movements slow and deliberate. My heart raced again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. What was in that bag? The next day, a foul smell began to seep into my home. It was putrid, like something rotten. I tried to ignore it, but it lingered, wrapping itself around me like a shroud. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow connected to Mr. Johnson. Had he done something terrible? I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, questioning every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind. That night, I barely slept, the smell invading my dreams. In the early hours of the morning, I heard noises outside. I crept to the window, peering through the curtains. Mr. Johnson was out in his backyard, digging a large hole in the ground, the moonlight glinting off a shovel in his hand. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched him work, the sense of dread washing over me like a wave. I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I had to confront him. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside and made my way to his backyard. As I approached, the stench intensified, almost overwhelming me. I found him bent over the hole, the dirt piled high around him. "Mr. Johnson," I called, forcing my voice to stay steady. He turned slowly, a blank expression on his face. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my heart racing. "What's in that bag?" He paused, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something. Fear, regret, but it was gone in an instant. "Mind your own business, Clara. You should go back inside." I stumbled back, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I turned and ran, fear propelling me back into my house. I locked the door and collapsed against it, gasping for breath. I spent the rest of the night awake, the shadows in my home feeling more ominous than ever. I knew I couldn't stay in Maplewood any longer. The man next door was a mystery I couldn't solve, and I feared that one day I might be the next photograph hanging on his wall. My name is Sarah Thompson, and I'm a 32-year-old teacher living in a small town called Monterey. My husband, Jake, and I always dreamed of starting a family. After years of trying and facing disappointment, we decided to foster a troubled teenager named Ethan. We thought we could provide him with a stable home and help him heal from his past. Little did we know how dark his past truly was. Ethan arrived on a chilly Friday afternoon, his belongings stuffed into a worn backpack. He was 15, tall and thin, with shaggy hair that fell over his eyes. He barely spoke as we showed him around our home. I could sense his anger and fear, and it broke my heart. I wanted to help him, to show him that he was safe here. Jake and I were determined to make it work. At first, things seemed promising. Ethan participated in family dinners, and we tried to include him in our weekend activities. But soon, small issues began to surface. He would have sudden outbursts, slamming doors and shouting when things didn't go his way. Jake and I exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to handle the situation. When we asked Ethan about his past, he would shut down, refusing to talk. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, I found a journal tucked under Ethan's bed. I hesitated, but my curiosity got the better of me. As I opened it, I felt a chill run down my spine. The pages were filled with disturbing entries, thoughts of anger, hurt, and violence. He wrote about feeling abandoned, about wanting revenge on those who had wronged him. My heart raced as I read more. Was he planning something? I quickly closed the journal and returned it to its hiding place, my mind racing with fear. As the weeks passed, Ethan's behavior grew more erratic. He started disappearing for hours, saying he was with friends. Jake and I tried to set limits, but he pushed back harder, his anger boiling over. One night, after a particularly heated argument about his curfew, Ethan stormed out of the house, yelling that he didn't need us. I stood frozen, fear gripping my heart. Where would he go? What would he do? That night, we stayed up waiting for him to return, the house filled with a tense silence. By morning, I was a bundle of nerves. When Ethan still hadn't come home, we decided to contact the police. They assured us they would look for him, but deep down, I feared the worst. After a few days, we received a call from the police. They had found Ethan's journal. My heart sank as they told us about the disturbing entries inside. There were plans to harm us, specific details that made my skin crawl. I felt sick. Could this boy I wanted to help truly want to hurt us? The officers urged us to take precautions, and I could see the concern in Jake's eyes. We barricaded the doors, our home feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. Just when we thought things couldn't get worse, we learned about Ethan's younger sibling, a girl named Lily, who had disappeared years ago. The case had never been solved, and the police believed Ethan might have been involved. My heart raced as I processed this new information. What had happened to Lily? And was Ethan somehow connected to her disappearance? Days turned into weeks, and Ethan remained missing. We lived in a state of constant fear, glancing at the door whenever we heard a noise. Every shadow seemed to loom larger. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. I started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced that Ethan was lurking in the dark, waiting for the right moment to strike. One rainy night, as I was washing dishes, I heard a soft knock at the back door. My heart dropped. I turned to Jake, who came into the kitchen, his face pale. We both approached the door cautiously. I peered through the window, my heart racing as I saw a figure standing in the rain. I opened the door just a crack, my voice trembling. Ethan. He stood there, soaked to the bone, eyes wild and frantic. "Let me in," he shouted, desperation in his voice. I hesitated, fear consuming me. What if this was a trap? I glanced at Jake, who shook his head slightly, urging me to be careful. "Why should we let you in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've scared us, Ethan. Please, I need to talk." He seemed genuinely upset, and I felt a pang of sympathy. But the memories of his journal replayed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Just then, the police car pulled up in front of our house. The flashing lights illuminated the dark night, and Ethan's face twisted in fear. "They can't find me. I can't go back," he screamed, backing away from me. I opened the door wider, unsure of what to do. As the officers approached, Ethan turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. I stood frozen, paralyzed by fear and confusion. The police chased after him, calling his name, but he was gone. Just like that, he vanished into the night, leaving us with more questions than answers. In the days that followed, I felt a heavy weight on my chest. Ethan was out there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching us, waiting for the right moment to return. Our lives, once filled with hope, became shrouded in fear and uncertainty. We had opened our home to a troubled boy, and in return, we were left with the haunting knowledge that sometimes doing the right thing could lead to the darkest places. My name is Anna Mitchell, and I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer. I recently moved to a small city, seeking a fresh start after a tough breakup. I thought a new job and a new place would help me heal. I found a cozy little apartment and was excited to make it my own. However, things took a dark turn shortly after I settled in. It started with phone calls. At first, I thought it was just a wrong number. A few days after I moved in, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was deep and rough. "Rachel, you need to give me back the bag." "I know you have it." Confused, I replied. "You must have the wrong person. My name is Anna." But the man didn't seem to care. "Stop playing games. I know you're in there. You have what's mine." He hung up, leaving me shaken. I figured I'd never hear from him again, but he called back the next day, and the next, each time more aggressive than before. "Rachel, you can't hide from me. You need to return that money." I tried to block the number, but he found ways to call me from different lines. I felt trapped, like I was being hunted by a ghost. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The calls became a daily torment, and I found myself jumping at every ring of my phone. I started to dread answering it. One night, after a long day at work, I returned home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open. The sight inside made my stomach drop. My living room was a mess. Cushions were tossed aside. Drawers were pulled out, and my belongings were scattered everywhere. Panic surged through me. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered me. I quickly grabbed my phone and called the police, my hands shaking. When they arrived, I explained the strange calls and the ransacked apartment. To my shock, the officer shrugged it off. "Could just be a misunderstanding, ma'am. You may have left the door unlocked." I felt infuriated and scared. How could they not take this seriously? I was terrified in my own home. Determined to figure out who Rachel was, I started to dig deeper. I visited the apartment office and asked about the previous tenant. The manager looked at me with a frown. "Rachel? She lived here a few months ago, but left suddenly. We didn't have a forwarding address." I felt a chill run down my spine. Why had she left so abruptly? I decided to do some online searching. After hours of scrolling through social media and local news, I found a news article about a woman named Rachel who had been involved in a robbery gone wrong. She had stolen a large sum of money and had gone missing shortly after. My heart raced as I read it. The more I uncovered, the more I realized I was in way over my head. As days passed, the calls continued, and I started to feel eyes on me. I noticed a black car parked across the street, watching my apartment. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but the feeling of being hunted was overwhelming. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. One evening, after another call that left me feeling helpless, I decided to confront the man. I recorded his number and planned to answer aggressively. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the phone. "I'm not Rachel. Leave me alone." His voice was low and threatening. "You're in over your head, Anna. Rachel owes money to people who don't take kindly to being messed with. You're just a stand-in for her. If you have any sense, you'll find her and get me what's mine. Or else." The call ended, and I was left trembling. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to find Rachel. I went to the police station again, but they still dismissed my fears as paranoia. "Focus on your safety and ignore the calls," they advised. Frustrated, I left and decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to people in the neighborhood, asking if anyone knew Rachel. A few people recognized the name, but said they hadn't seen her in weeks. I felt like I was chasing shadows. Then, one evening as I returned home, I spotted a woman lurking near my building. She had dark hair and looked nervous. "Rachel?" I called out, desperation in my voice. The woman turned, her eyes wide with fear. "You need to get out of here. They're looking for me." Before I could react, she ran off into the night. I stood frozen, my heart racing. Had I finally found her? Or had I just opened the door to danger? That night, I locked every door and window, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment any longer. I was terrified of what might happen next. The phone calls, the ransacked apartment, the black car. It all pointed to something sinister. And just when I thought I might be safe, I heard a knock at my door. My heart dropped. I peeked through the peephole, seeing a shadowy figure standing outside. Was it the man from the calls, or was it Rachel? I held my breath, unsure of what to do. In that moment, I realized that I was trapped in a nightmare of someone else's making. I had become a pawn in a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than I ever imagined. As I backed away from the door, I understood. I had to find a way out, or I might never escape this city, or the ghosts that haunted it. My name is Mark Turner, and I'm 36 years old. I live with my family in a small house. We recently inherited an old farmhouse from a distant relative we never even knew. While the idea of living in a big old house excited the kids, I felt a sense of dread as we drove up the gravel path leading to our new home. The house was weathered and worn, standing defiantly against the backdrop of a gray sky. The first few days were filled with excitement as we unpacked boxes and planned renovations. But as we began to explore the house, we discovered a hidden cellar beneath the creaky floorboards of the kitchen. The door was heavy and old, and it creaked loudly as I opened it, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. My heart raced as I grabbed a flashlight and led my family down. At the bottom, we found a room filled with dust and cobwebs. Old diaries lined the shelves, yellowed with age, and faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls. As we sifted through the items, I felt an unsettling chill in the air. The diaries told stories of our ancestors, mysterious rituals, strange gatherings, and whispers of a cult-like group that practiced dark and twisted traditions. The more we read, the more disturbed I became. The accounts spoke of abuse and secrecy, of sacrifices made in the name of power. I glanced at Lisa, and I could see the worry in her eyes. "Maybe we should stop," she whispered. But curiosity got the better of us. We delved deeper, driven by the need to understand our family's dark history. That night, As we sat around the dinner table, the atmosphere felt heavy. A candle flickered, casting ominous shadows on the walls. Sarah suddenly gasped, pointing to the corner of the room. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. We all turned to look, but nothing was there. Lisa tried to brush it off, but I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. Strange occurrences began to plague the house. Whispers echoed through the hallways at night. Objects would move on their own. My tools misplaced. Chairs pulled away from the table as if someone had just gotten up. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I heard soft whispers coming from the cellar. My heart raced as I grabbed the flashlight and made my way down the stairs. The air was thick and suffocating, and I could feel the oppressive weight of something unseen. As I stepped into the cellar, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. "Mark, help us." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was faint, almost childlike. I fumbled for the light switch, but it flickered and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. Panic surged as I turned to run back up the stairs, but I stumbled over something on the floor, falling hard. I could hear my breath quicken, and I felt a cold hand brush against my cheek. I scrambled to my feet and bolted up the stairs, slamming the cellar door behind me. I leaned against it, panting, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I needed to tell Lisa, but I was terrified of what I might reveal. The following days were filled with tension. Lisa had noticed my change in behavior. I was on edge, jumping at every noise. I tried to dismiss it, but the feeling of being watched never left me. One night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a soft thud coming from the hallway. I got up to investigate, my heart pounding. As I stepped into the hall, I saw Jake standing there, eyes wide with fear. "Dad, I heard someone calling my name," he whispered. My blood ran cold. I knelt beside him, trying to reassure him, but I felt the weight of dread settling in my chest. We decided to dig deeper into our family history, thinking maybe we could find a way to put the spirits to rest. We visited the local library, hoping to uncover more about the cult and its practices. The librarian, an elderly woman, eyed us suspiciously when we mentioned our family name. "You should be careful," she warned. "Some things are better left buried." That night, the whispers returned, more insistent this time. "Help us, help us." They echoed through the house, growing louder, more frantic. I felt a chill wash over me as I realized the voices were coming from the cellar again. I had to confront whatever was down there. My family's history was tainted, and I needed to know the truth. With Lisa beside me, I opened the cellar door once more. The air was thick with an unnatural energy, and I could feel the whispers clawing at my mind. We descended the staircase, the flashlight flickering ominously. As we reached the bottom, the shadows felt alive, swirling around us. Suddenly, the walls seemed to close in, and I heard a loud crash. A shelf toppled over, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside lay a small rusted box. I opened it, and inside were small, withered dolls and strange symbols drawn in blood. A wave of nausea hit me. These were offerings, tokens from the rituals mentioned in the diaries. At that moment, we realized our family's dark legacy wasn't buried at all. It was alive, and it wanted something from us. I could feel the energy shift in the room, and the whispers turned into screams. "You must pay. You must pay." I grabbed Lisa's hand, and we ran back up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind us. Our lives would never be the same. The farmhouse was no longer a home, but a prison of our ancestors' sins. We had uncovered a terrifying secret, and now it was clear. The darkness that plagued our family was far from over. We must confront our past before it consumed us entirely. My name is Detective Sam Reynolds, and I'm 42 years old. I spent nearly 2 decades working for the police department in the small town of Maple Grove. Known for my dedication, I often took on cases that others would shy away from. But nothing could prepare me for the string of missing persons cases that began to surface last fall. It started with a few reports of people vanishing without a trace. Young women, mostly, who had been seen last in downtown Maple Grove. The cases quickly drew attention, and the mood in town shifted from concern to fear. As I delved into the investigations, I felt a weight pressing down on me. With each missing person, I could sense the urgency growing. One rainy afternoon, I received a tip that would change everything. A man named Greg, who had a reputation for being a bit of a recluse, claimed he had information about the disappearances. I didn't think much of it at first. People often claim to know things, only to waste my time. But something in his tone intrigued me, so I agreed to meet him at a diner on the edge of town. As I entered, the bell above the door chimed, and I spotted Greg sitting in a corner booth, his eyes darting around nervously. He was in his late 30s, disheveled, with a wild look about him. I slid into the seat across from him, and he leaned in, lowering his voice. "Detective, I know what happened to those girls." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? Tell me everything." Greg gulped, his hands shaking as he spoke. He described a network of individuals who preyed on vulnerable people, those who were struggling, those who were lost. They lure them in, make them feel safe. And then, he trailed off, his eyes wide with fear. "What happens then?" I pressed, sensing he was holding back. "They disappear. No one looks for them because they think they've run away. But they don't. They're taken." Greg's voice cracked, and I could tell he was terrified. I sat back, processing what he was saying. "And you know this how?" He leaned even closer, his breath quickening. "Because I used to be one of them. I was part of it, but I got out." The weight of his confession settled heavily in the air. I needed to tread carefully. "You have to tell me everything you know. Names, places, anything." Over the next hour, Greg spilled everything he could remember. He spoke of a secret group that operated in the shadows, people in positions of power who turned a blind eye to the crimes being committed. He mentioned local officials, people I had trusted in the department. My mind raced as I jotted down notes. As I left the diner, a sense of dread washed over me. I felt like I was stepping into a dark world. I needed to investigate further, but I also felt a growing sense of danger. Greg had put me on a path that could lead to something terrifying. I began by looking into the names Greg had given me. I started with the local officials, digging through records and past cases. It didn't take long to uncover some unsettling connections, missing reports that had gone unfiled, suspicious activity that had been ignored. I felt like I was unraveling a web of corruption that ran deep. Days turned into weeks, and I felt the tension in the air grow thicker. Someone was watching me. I could sense it. Late at night, I would hear footsteps outside my home, see shadows lurking near my car. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but deep down, I knew I was being followed. One evening, as I returned home from a late shift, I found my front door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open, calling out, "Hello." Silence answered me. I stepped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt wrong. That's when I noticed the papers scattered across my kitchen table. My notes, my investigation. Someone had been in my home. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door, my mind racing. I fumbled for my phone and called Greg. "I think they're on to me. I need your help." But there was no answer. Panic surged through me. I decided to go back to the diner, hoping to find him there. As I drove through the rain-soaked streets, I felt a growing sense of dread. What if he was in danger too? When I arrived, the diner was empty, the lights dimmed. I approached the counter, calling out for the owner. No response. Just as I turned to leave, I noticed something glinting on the floor. I knelt down and picked up a pendant, a small silver charm in the shape of an eye. As I examined it, I felt a chill run through me. I had seen this before, on one of the missing women. Just then, I heard a creak behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. I bolted for the door, my instincts screaming that I needed to get out. As I reached my car, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the parking lot, a shadowy figure watching me. My heart pounded in my chest. I jumped into my car and sped away, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I needed to expose what I had learned before it was too late. But as I drove, I realized that the very people I had trusted were the ones trying to silence me. I had entered a dangerous game, and now I was a pawn in a deadly chess match. The chilling confession had unleashed a monster I couldn't control, and I was running out of time. I had to find a way to reveal the truth, or risk becoming another name on the list of missing persons. The fight for justice had only just begun, and I knew I was in for the battle of my life. My name is Rachel Miller, and I'm 27 years old. I recently moved to a small apartment in a bustling city with my boyfriend, Mike. We were excited to start this new chapter of our lives, but I never imagined how quickly that excitement would turn into dread. At first, everything seemed perfect. The apartment was cozy, with large windows that let in the sunlight, and the neighborhood felt vibrant and friendly. However, it wasn't long before strange things began to happen. It started subtly. Items would go missing. My favorite mug vanished from the kitchen, and Mike's keys would end up in places we had never left them. We laughed it off, attributing it to our hectic lives and the stress of moving. But as the days went by, the occurrences became more unsettling. I would hear unexplained noises at night, soft rustling sounds, and faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. I often found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, convinced that someone was watching us. Mike would joke about my overactive imagination, but I could see the worry in his eyes too. One evening, as we settled in to watch TV, I noticed a small glint in the corner of the room. I got up to investigate, feeling the strange sense of unease. As I approached the bookshelf, I spotted what looked like a tiny lens peeking out from behind a stack of books. My stomach dropped as I realized it was a hidden camera. "Mike," I shouted, my voice trembling. He rushed over, and I pointed to the camera. "Look, there's a camera in our living room." His face turned pale as he inspected it. "How long has this been here?" he asked, his voice low. I felt sick to my stomach. We had been recorded without our consent, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in serious danger. We decided to confront our landlord, a man named Mr. Jenkins, who had seemed friendly enough when we moved in. I called him the next day, my hand shaking as I explained what we had found. "This is unacceptable. We want answers," I demanded. To my shock, he shrugged it off, claiming it was just a security measure for the building. "It's nothing to worry about," he said, his tone dismissive. "You're being paranoid. I'll have it removed." But his indifference only fueled my fear. How could he be so casual about our privacy being invaded? Determined to uncover the truth, we began to investigate the apartment's history. I went online, searching for any information about previous tenants. What I found sent chills down my spine. Reports of odd occurrences, missing persons, and strange happenings filled the forums. Some tenants had vanished without a trace, their names barely remembered. Others spoke of feeling watched, just as we did. I shared my findings with Mike, and together we decided to dig deeper. We visited the local library, hoping to find any public records about the apartment and its past residents. The librarian was hesitant to help at first, but when I mentioned the missing persons, her demeanor changed. She pulled out old newspaper clippings, and we pored over the pages. One article caught my attention. It detailed the mysterious disappearance of a woman named Sarah Collins, who had lived in our apartment 5 years prior. The last known sighting of her was just a block away, and the police had never found any leads. My heart raced as I realized that we were living in a place with a dark history, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. That night, we decided to set up our own surveillance. We placed our phones around the apartment to record any strange noises while we slept. As we lay in bed, I felt a knot in my stomach. My mind raced with thoughts of what might be happening around us, what we might uncover. The next day, we reviewed the footage. My heart raced as I watched the screen, but what we saw was beyond anything I could have imagined. In the middle of the night, shadows moved across the room, and the whispers were clearer than ever. "Help us, help us." The words echoed in my ears, sending chills down my spine. We couldn't ignore it any longer. We needed to get out. But as we started packing up our things, I noticed something on the camera footage. A figure standing outside our window, watching us. I froze, my heart pounding. I could feel the panic rising as I turned to Mike. "We have to leave now." As we hurried to gather our belongings, I heard a loud bang at the door. My heart stopped. I glanced at Mike, fear etched on his face. "What do we do?" he whispered. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. Just as I pressed the call button, the door burst open, and Mr. Jenkins stood there, his expression dark and menacing. "You shouldn't have looked into this," he said, his voice low and threatening. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The hidden camera, the missing tenants, the whispers, it was all a part of something much larger and more sinister than we could have imagined. We had stumbled into a web of manipulation and surveillance that put our lives at risk. Without thinking, I pushed past him and ran down the stairs, Mike close behind. We dashed into the street, adrenaline fueling our escape. As we reached the corner, I glanced back to see Mr. Jenkins standing in the doorway, watching us with a chilling smile. We made it to the police station and reported everything. As they took our statements, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But deep down, I knew the threat wasn't over. The unseen danger was still lurking, and we had to stay vigilant. Our lives had been forever changed, haunted by the chilling truth of what existed in the shadows of our once beloved apartment. My name is Emily Carter, and I am a 29-year-old nurse working the night shift at St. Joseph's Hospital in a town called Crestwood. The night shift is often quiet, with only the sounds of beeping machines and the occasional shuffle of feet in the hallways. But lately, my nights have been anything but peaceful. It all started a few weeks ago when I began to notice a disturbing pattern among the patients coming in after dark. They were mostly young men, and their injuries were strikingly similar. Broken ribs, bruises, and cuts that looked like they had been inflicted in a fight. I treated them with care, but the more I saw, the more my gut twisted with unease. One night, I was assigned to care for a young man named Tyler. He came in with a black eye and a swollen lip, claiming he had fallen down the stairs. But the look in his eyes told me he was hiding something. As I cleaned his wounds, I couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure that's what happened?" He hesitated, then looked away. "It's just a bad night, you know." I felt a tightness in my chest. I had heard whispers about an underground fight club that operated in the area, a place where young men went to prove themselves. The community pretended it didn't exist, but I had my suspicions. After treating Tyler, I decided I needed to dig deeper. The next day, I reported my findings to my supervisor, Dr. Harris. I laid out the patterns I had noticed, hoping he would take me seriously. Instead, he dismissed my concerns. "Emily, you're just being paranoid. These injuries can happen anywhere. Focus on your patients." His words stung, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something much darker happening. Determined to protect my patients, I decided to befriend Tyler. I told him I was worried about him, and that he didn't have to hide the truth from me. To my surprise, he opened up a little. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "The Fight Club, it's not just about fighting. It's about survival." As we talked, I learned more about the underground world he was involved in. He described the adrenaline, the rush of being in the ring, and the allure of quick money. But there was a darker side too. Rumors of young men disappearing after fights, never to be seen again. My heart raced as I listened. Could it be true? That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed our conversation in my mind, filled with a mix of fear and determination. I had to find out more. I decided to follow Tyler when he left the hospital after his treatment. My instincts told me that if I wanted to uncover the truth, I had to get closer to the fight club. I waited until he left and discreetly followed him through the dark streets. My heart pounded in my chest as I trailed behind him, ducking into shadows whenever he glanced back. After a while, we arrived at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The sounds of shouting and cheering echoed from inside, and my stomach churned with anxiety. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping into the dimly lit space. The sight before me was shocking. Men surrounded a makeshift ring, yelling and placing bets. Blood stained the floor, and the atmosphere was electric with danger. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced myself to move closer. Tyler was in the ring, fighting against another man. The crowd roared as they exchanged blows, and I could see the pain etched on Tyler's face. I wanted to pull him out, to tell him to stop, but I felt paralyzed. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. As the fight continued, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A group of men standing off to the side, watching the fight with cold, calculating eyes. They seemed to control everything, their presence sending chills down my spine. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I realized that these men were likely involved in the disappearances. Suddenly, the fight ended, and Tyler fell to the ground, unable to get back up. Panic surged through me as I rushed to his side. "Tyler, are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside him. He groaned, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "We need to get out of here," he whispered, looking around nervously. As I helped him up, I noticed the group of men approaching us. "You two shouldn't be here," one of them said, a sinister smile creeping across his face. My heart raced as I realized we were in serious danger. "Let's go, Tyler," I urged, trying to pull him away. But before we could escape, the men blocked our path. "You want to know the truth?" the leader sneered. "You should have stayed away." Fear gripped me as I realized the depth of the situation. The Fight Club wasn't just a place for proving strength. It was a front for something much darker. My mind raced as I searched for a way out. "We're just leaving," I said, trying to sound confident. But they didn't move. Instead, they stepped closer, their intentions clear. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I knew we had to act fast. "Run," I shouted to Tyler, and we bolted toward the exit. As we dashed through the door, I could hear them yelling behind us. We sprinted down the street, adrenaline coursing through our veins. I didn't stop until we reached the safety of the hospital. Breathless and trembling, I turned to Tyler. "We need to tell someone about this, about everything." But as I looked into his eyes, I saw doubt. "They won't believe us," he replied, shaking his head. I knew he was right. The Fight Club was a hidden world, and exposing it would put our lives in jeopardy. But I couldn't walk away. I had to protect the vulnerable young men who were being lured into this nightmare. As I lay awake that night, the weight of my decision pressed heavily on my chest. I realized that I was now part of something much larger, something dangerous. The Fight Club may have been hidden in the shadows, but I was determined to shine a light on the truth, no matter the cost. My name is Alex Ramirez, and I'm a 30-year-old rideshare driver living in the city of Fairview. I've spent countless nights dragging strangers around, listening to their stories, and witnessing the city come alive. But one night, everything changed, and it turned into a nightmare I could never have predicted. It was a typical Friday night when I received a ping for a ride. The app showed the pickup location was in a dimly lit alley. I hesitated for a moment but drove over anyway. As I pulled up, a man stepped out of the shadows, anxiously looking around. He was in his late 20s, wearing a hoodie and jeans, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the door. "Hey man, thanks for picking me up," he said, his voice shaky. I nodded and welcomed him into the back seat. "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep the mood light. "Just drive, anywhere but here," he replied, his eyes darting around nervously. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about him. I drove off, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. He seemed to be sweating, his forehead glistening under the dim light of the dashboard. As we navigated through the city streets, he began to open up. "I'm in trouble," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone is after me." My heart raced. "What do you mean? Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound reassuring. He took a deep breath, his hands gripping the seat. "I have evidence. Something big. A powerful politician is involved in some really bad stuff. I thought I could expose him, but now..." He trailed off, his eyes wide with fear. "Evidence? What kind of evidence?" I asked, my curiosity piqued, but also filled with dread. He glanced nervously out the window and lowered his voice. "I recorded a meeting. They were discussing illegal activities, drugs, money laundering, you name it." My mind raced. This was serious. "You need to go to the police," I urged. "They can protect you." He shook his head vigorously. "No, they're in on it. I can't trust anyone." Just then, I noticed a dark car trailing closely behind us. My stomach dropped as I tried to focus on the road. Are you sure you're not just being paranoid?" I asked, but deep down, I knew something was off. The car kept pace, turning with us, its headlights glaring. "Look," he pointed. "They're following us." Panic surged through me. I glanced in the rearview mirror again and saw the dark car's headlights getting closer. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Take a left up ahead," he shouted. I followed his instructions, my heart pounding. The shadows of the city loomed around us as I tried to shake the car behind us. We weaved through alleys and side streets, but the dark vehicle stayed on our tail, relentless. Just when I thought we might lose them, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car revving up behind us. "They're gaining on us," I yelled, fear gripping my heart. "I can't keep this up. Just keep driving. Don't stop," he shouted. I pressed the gas pedal harder, but the dark car was too close. Suddenly, they swerved and cut us off, forcing me to slam on the brakes. We skidded to a halt, and before I could react, several men jumped out of the car, their faces shrouded in darkness. "Get out of the car," one of them yelled, brandishing a weapon. My heart raced, and I felt like I was about to be sick. "What do we do?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "Run," the passenger shouted as he threw open the door and bolted. I followed instinctively, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We sprinted down the street, glancing back to see the men chasing us, shouting angrily. I could feel my lungs burning as we turned down another alley, desperation pushing us forward. "This way," my passenger urged, leading us into a narrow passage. We ducked behind some garbage bins, trying to catch our breath. "They can't find us here," he said, panting. My mind buzzed with what had just happened. I was in deep trouble now, pulled into a dangerous game I didn't want to play. "We need to get to the police," I insisted, but he shook his head. "It's too late for that. They'll come for you too." Just then, I heard footsteps approaching. My heart raced as I peered around the corner. The men were searching for us, their shadows flickering in the dim light. "We need to split up," I whispered. "I'll distract them." "No, it's too risky," he hissed, clutching my arm. But I knew we had no other choice. I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the bins, shouting to grab their attention. "Hey, over here." The men turned, and I took off running in the opposite direction. I could hear their shouts behind me, the sound of their footsteps growing louder. I sprinted through the maze of alleys, my heart pounding in my chest. Just as I thought I might find a way out, I stumbled and fell hard against the pavement. Pain shot through my body as I scrambled to get up, but I could hear the men closing in. I had to keep going. In a moment of sheer luck, I spotted a police car parked on the street ahead. I took off toward it, adrenaline pushing me past the pain. I yelled for help, waving my arms frantically. The officers jumped out, clearly startled by my appearance. "Help! They're after me!" I gasped, pointing back toward the alley. "You have to stop them." The officers quickly radioed for backup, and I felt a rush of relief wash over me. But as they moved to investigate, I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. I had stumbled into a world of corruption and danger, and my life would never be the same again. I couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even the very people who were supposed to protect me. I had to survive this, no matter the cost. My name is Jenna Collins, and I'm a 21-year-old college student living in a small apartment near campus. I decided to sublet a room to help with the bills, thinking it would be a great way to meet someone new. Little did I know that my decision would lead me into a nightmare. When I first met my new roommate, Sarah, she seemed friendly and normal. She was in her early 20s, with a bright smile and a bubbly personality. We hit it off immediately, chatting about our classes and interests. I felt relieved to have someone to share the space with, especially since I was feeling the financial strain of college life. At first, everything was fine, but soon I began to notice strange behaviors. Sarah would often make late-night phone calls, her voice low and hurried. I could hear snippets of her conversations, but they always seemed vague and secretive. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she was just dealing with personal issues. Then, I noticed her becoming increasingly paranoid about our privacy. She would often check the locks on the doors and windows, even during the day. One evening, I caught her peering out the window, her expression tense as she scanned the street below. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing," she replied quickly, but I could see the fear in her eyes. It made me uneasy, but I didn't want to pry. I figured she was just going through something, and I wanted to be supportive. One night, I returned home late from studying at the library. As I walked into the apartment, I noticed Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She was scrolling through something, her brow furrowed in concentration. I tried to say hello, but she barely acknowledged me, her focus entirely on the screen. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced over her shoulder. My heart sank as I realized she was researching me, my social media profiles, my family, even my old school records. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. She jumped, closing the laptop quickly. "Just looking up some stuff for a project," she stammered, but I could tell she was lying. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why was she so interested in my life? The next day, I decided to confront her. "Sarah, I saw what you were looking at last night. It made me uncomfortable," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. But instead of apologizing, she became defensive. "You don't understand. I need to know who I'm living with." Her hostility caught me off guard. "I'm not a threat to you, Sarah. I just want to feel safe in my own home." She glared at me, and I could see the tension in her body. I backed off, feeling more uneasy than ever. As the days went by, I started to find more signs that something was seriously wrong. I discovered hidden cameras in common areas of the apartment, one in the living room, another in the kitchen. My heart raced as I realized I was being watched. I felt violated and terrified. Who was this person I had let into my home? I decided I needed to take action. I called my best friend, Mia, and told her everything. "You need to get out of there, Jenna. This isn't normal," she urged. I agreed, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I needed proof before I could confront Sarah again. That night, I set up my own camera in my room, hoping to catch her in the act. I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might discover. The next morning, I reviewed the footage, and my stomach dropped. I watched as Sarah entered my room while I was asleep, rifling through my things. She picked up my phone and stared at it for a long time, her expression a mix of fascination and fear. I felt sick. I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed a bag and decided to stay with Mia for a few days while I figured out what to do. As I was leaving, I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Where are you going?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm just going to visit a friend," I replied, trying to sound casual. But I could see the anger in her eyes. "You can't just leave like this. We need to talk." I hurried out the door, my heart racing. I drove to Mia's place, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. But I knew I couldn't escape this easily. I had to report Sarah to the authorities. The next day, I went to the police station and explained everything. They took my statement seriously and promised to look into it. But as I left, I felt a sense of dread creeping back in. What if Sarah found out I had gone to the police? That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have left. You don't know what I'm capable of." My heart raced as I realized it was Sarah. I felt trapped, like I was being hunted. I called Mia, my voice shaking. "I think she knows where I am. I'm scared." Mia urged me to stay with her and not go back to the apartment. I agreed, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. The next day, I decided to confront Sarah one last time. I returned to the apartment, my heart pounding. I found her sitting on the couch, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," I said, trying to sound brave. "About what?" she replied, her voice cold. I took a deep breath. "About the cameras. About everything. This isn't normal, Sarah. You need help." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me what to do? You don't know anything about me." I felt a surge of fear. "I just want to feel safe in my own home," I shouted, my voice echoing in the small space. In that moment, everything changed. Sarah lunged at me, her hands reaching for my throat. I barely managed to dodge her, scrambling back toward the door. "Get away from me," I screamed, my heart racing. I bolted out of the apartment, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I ran down the stairs and out into the street, not stopping until I reached Mia's place. I collapsed on her doorstep, shaking and terrified. I knew I had to take control of my life again. I reported Sarah to the police, and they took her into custody. But the fear lingered. I had let someone into my life who turned out to be a monster, and I would never forget the feeling of being hunted in my own home. The experience changed me forever, leaving me wary of trusting anyone again. My name is Daniel Harris, and I'm a 34-year-old antique dealer living in a small town called Maplewood. I've always had a passion for collecting rare items, so when I heard about a mysterious auction featuring unusual artifacts, I couldn't resist attending. The auction was held in an old warehouse, dimly lit and filled with whispers of the past. I scanned the room, taking in the strange and eerie items on display. Most people seemed drawn to the flashy pieces, but I found myself gravitating toward a small, unassuming box sitting quietly on a shelf. It was wooden, with intricate carvings that told no story I could decipher. Something about it called to me. After a fierce bidding war, I won the box, my heart racing with excitement. I took it home, eager to uncover its secrets. As I opened it, my stomach twisted. Inside were personal belongings, old photographs, a child's teddy bear, and various trinkets belonging to missing persons from different decades. Each item felt heavy with lost memories, and a chill ran down my spine. Driven by curiosity, I began to investigate the origins of the box and its previous owners. What I discovered sent shivers through me. The people who had owned that box before me all met tragic ends: accidents, disappearances, and mysterious deaths. I couldn't shake the feeling that the box was cursed. As I pieced together the chilling history, I realized the items inside weren't just relics. They were clues to a series of unsolved crimes. Someone had taken these personal belongings and hidden them away, and now I was linked to it all. The deeper I dug, the more I felt eyes watching me, lurking in the shadows of my own home. One night, as I sat alone in my living room, I heard a soft knock at the door. My heart raced. I opened it slowly, but no one was there. I stepped outside, scanning the dimly lit street. That's when I noticed a figure standing at the end of the road, shrouded in darkness. They turned and disappeared before I could call out. Fear gripped me. I felt like I was being hunted. I decided to report my findings to the police, but as I prepared to leave, I found the box on my table, its lid slightly ajar. It seemed to beckon me to stay. The next morning, I awoke to a message on my phone, a photo of the box, taken from inside my home, with the words, "Leave it alone." My heart sank. I was in too deep now, and I knew I had to uncover the truth before it was too late. Someone wanted to keep the secrets hidden, and I was running out of time.